The Girl from Oto, Book 1, Chapter 5, Spring 1487, Zaragoza, Aragon, Ramon. Baron Ramon de Oto looked through the pile of letters that sat waiting for him in the front hall. The Zaragoza house had been shuttered for a year, and the air had the stale smell that he always associated with the place. It was his least favorite of the Oto family's holdings. The home had come into their possession generations ago, after the previous owners, wealthy wool merchants, were entirely extinguished in the course of 1 week by the plague. Their faces were carved in stone over the front door. The round face of the wife was placid and gentle, while her husband had a hawkish nose and a stern expression. Ramon had forgotten how much the man's proprietary air annoyed him. It had been a long time since he set foot here. He had spent most of the last several years fighting the Moors in the south and launching raids into the French-occupied north. But now that his father was dead, Ramon had to assume the position of representative at the interminable council meetings of the sheep ranchers. For the sake of his family, for his young son Pellegrin, he was determined to plumb the inner workings of the wool trade and profit from it. Frowning, he pulled the red wax seal off a letter on the top of the pile. Carlos Sacazar had invited him to dine. The merchant family was an old one, whose rise to prominence as a sheep-raising, wool-trading force in Zaragoza was unmatched. The Sacazars had always been suspicious of the Otos for taking possession of their neighbor's home all those years ago. But since there was no will and no heirs to dispute it, the Sacazars knew better than to stick their noses in the business of a powerful, noble family. Ramon called a servant to his side. Despite his aversion to the merchant class, he would accept the invitation. Studying the enemy seemed a prudent first step in his effort to understand the world of wool. Sitting at Carlo's gleaming oak table, Ramon arranged his face into a blank mask. His eyes slid around the room. The stonework surrounding the hearth rivaled anything he had seen in the finest Moorish palace. The silver on the table was as fine as his own, and the smooth rose-colored stone floor laid with hand-hooked Moorish rugs was more splendid than any surface in Castle Oto. "Pink marble," Carlo announced, grinning at Ramon in an entirely too familiar way. "Imported from Italy." Ramon did not return the smile. "Your family has done well." When a servant approached from the left with a pitcher of wine, he made a hissing noise and struck at the boy with his hand. The boy jumped back, terrified. "Servants approach me from the other side. Is that clear?" "Yes, my lord," the boy said. Carlo's brow furrowed. "Forgive us, my lord." "It is forgotten." Ramon raised his cup in salute. Carlo followed suit. "It is my pleasure and privilege to have a representative of another great family at my table this night. It is about time we shared a meal, in my opinion. May I express the deep sorrow of my family at the passing of your parents? God rest their souls. And may I wish your son and heir a long and happy life, with many brothers and sisters to follow." Ramon acknowledged Carlo's niceties with a solemn nod, and they both sipped. The wine was excellent. A servant laid a platter of trout between them. Ramon examined it and made a slashing gesture with one hand. "I do not eat trout. Remove it at once." The servant rushed forward and took up the platter. "How unfortunate that our cook chose to serve trout tonight," Carlo said. He made a tut-tut noise, clicking his tongue on the roof of his mouth. "Yes, yes, remove it all. I will not eat what my guest will not eat." In fact, Ramon loved trout. But he knew that Alfonso, King of Castilla, for a brief moment, in time a few years ago, had his royal career cut short by a meal of poisoned trout. In all likelihood, Carlos Sacazar did not plan to poison him. Still, it never hurt to be cautious. The next platter that emerged from the kitchens contained steaks fried in onions and garlic. Both men dug into their slabs of meat enthusiastically. "Is this one of yours?" Ramon asked, brandishing a chunk of steak on the tip of his knife. "Yes, we are proud of our beef." Carlo chewed so vigorously that pink juices leaked from the corners of his mouth. The two men discussed wool prices, weather, the Moorish wars in the south, and the problem of predation on livestock by bears and wolves. When the meal was finished, Carlo's intent became clear. "Your father likely informed you that both our houses share the services of a Moorish family who transported our wool to Tortosa for generations." "Yes, the Mosequins? They have been ruined. They were caught out as heretics. Someone saw the old man Ibrahim praying the way they do, on his knees on a rug. That is the rumor anyway. And you know the punishment. Burned at the stake, I assume." "The old man, yes. The rest have fled to Granada. They have family there. It's where they all go now. They have nowhere left, I suppose." "They knew the consequences," Ramon said, shrugging. "My father considered them friends." Carlo signaled to a servant to pour more wine. He pushed a plate of honey-soaked almonds across the table to Ramon. "That was a different time. No point dwelling on the past." Ramon ignored the sweets. "Without them, we've lost our wool transport to the sea. They were the best in Zaragoza, and trustworthy. Our families both relied on them." "We will find a new agent. It is simple enough." "With all respect, Baron, it is not simple. There are only a few other wool-transporting outfits in Zaragoza, and none of them have any interest in working with us. I've already inquired." "It will be a different matter when I inquire, I assure you. I intend to increase my production of merino sheep and ship more wool east across the sea." Carlo opened his mouth, then shut it. "The Florentine market is not what it once was," he said after a moment, his mild gaze never leaving Ramon's face. "But if you discover a way to accomplish your plan, I will be the first to congratulate you." Leaning back in his chair in the chapter house of the church where the Brotherhood convened each Easter, listening to the sheep breeders arguing about poaching and territorial disputes, Ramon realized that Carlos Sacazar was right. Things had changed. The royal agents monitoring the meeting weighed in annoyingly on every little issue. Rights and privileges that used to belong to noble families now belonged to the royals. The only favor anyone was interested in currying was that of Queen Isabella. Even though King Ferdinand was the one from Aragon and she was Castilian, everyone knew she held the royal purse strings. Equally bad was the confirmation that the Italian markets had dwindled to nearly nothing because of the plague. Florence was a city of ghosts, the sheep breeders said. Even if Ramon could find an outfit to pole barge his wool along the river Ebro to the coast, the Italian merchants whose ships once moored at Tortosa were nearly all dead. His wool would rot on the wharves. Rats would carry off tufts to make nests. The grease and the fibers would go rancid in the summer sun. He worked the muscles in his jaw. When he flicked a glance across the table, he was irritated to see Carlo's face plastered with smugness. No one in the room, save the royal agents, spoke more often or more confidently than he. Ramon wished that his father had spent more time instructing him in the ways of business. But whether he was raiding in the north or fighting the Moors in the south, his entire life had been dedicated to war. For the first time, he did not know what to do. After the meeting, Carlo led him to a small square adjacent to the church. They stood watching twilight descend over the city. An icy wind was blowing from the north. Instead of turning his back to the wind, however, Carlo let it scour his face. He opened his arms and smiled. "Feel the shock of it." Most men think of such a wind as a curse, but not me. It is a blessing, because God has seen fit to shower the Sakazar family with good fortune from the north." Ramon felt a shudder of impatience run through him. He despised men who played games with words. "It amuses me to think of this as a trade wind," Carlo went on. "Oh, I know it is far from warm and leagues from the sea, but a trade wind it is just the same." He thrust a finger straight into the path of the wind. "Over the mountains. That is the place to sell wool. I already do. I transport it by mule across those mountains and sell it on the other side." "You do business with the French?" Ramon put a hand on his sword, closing his fist reflexively around the handle. The unyielding coldness of the metal pressed through the leather of his glove. Carlo shook his head. "I sell the wool in Béarn, not France. I never set foot in France, I assure you. No reason to. But if the French want to buy my wool, why not? As a matter of family honor, I would never do business with the French. Our family holdings in the north are overrun with them. But Béarn, that is a different matter. My wife is from Béarn. So were my mother and grandmother." "Ah, then you are well suited to do business there," Carlo said. "As long as the English and the French are at war, the trade routes for English wool will suffer, and our merino will be in demand all over Europe. The future lies to the north, I promise you." "A man's promise is of little use to me. But I will consider your words," Ramon said, bowing slightly. "Good evening." He strode away across the darkening square, one hand still gripping the hilt of his sword. The plains that flanked the southern foothills of the Pyrenees were damp with mist. The horsemen traced a path across a field of low shrubs tipped with blue flowers, threading their way around jumbles of rock the color of old silver. They crossed a shallow stream. The clatter of hooves on stone filled the air, but Ramon ignored the sound, his mind churning with thoughts of Carlo Sakazar. What rankled him most was Carlo's assertion that he would gladly do business with the French. Clearly the man, as a member of the merchant class, had no personal stake in the issue of raiders from the north. The Otos, on the other hand, had a castle and lands in the northern territory of Cerdagne, which had been stolen by the French when Ramon was a boy. One of his fiercest desires was to reclaim that property. Joining the main road, the horsemen cantered toward the mountains, kicking up a spray of mud behind them. Ramon caught sight of a flock of sheep in the distance. Again he thought of Carlo and wondered if the sheep belonged to him. The idea struck Ramon that Carlo might be wealthier than he, and a scowl settled upon his face. The merchant class was unencumbered by the responsibilities of the nobles to their king and queen. If Carlo had to take up arms in the holy wars, his coddled existence would be quickly snuffed out. But for now, despite Ramon's aversion to the man, it would be wise to heed his guidance when it came to the business of wool. At least he had one trump card up his sleeve, the Abbey of Belarac. It lay on the ancient pilgrimage route that passed between Aragon and the market towns of Béarn. His family had been patrons of the place long ago. He remembered visiting there once as a child, but the connection between his family and the abbey was severed soon afterward when the plague swept through Belarac. A letter from the new abbess came shortly after he married Marguerite, pleading for the house of Otto to renew its patronage. His father had shown no interest, and Ramon himself told Marguerite to write a letter of refusal. Then he forgot the matter entirely, until now. Perhaps some use could be wrangled from the abbey after all. He glanced at the sky, marking the path of the sun with his eyes, estimating the distance that remained. In a few days he would see Belarac for himself, and he would have his answer.